The Great Hall of the Galactic Council floated in space like a crystal bubble. It spun slowly around a neutron star, using the star's energy to power its shields. Inside the hall, 12 different alien races sat in their special chairs. Each chair was made for a different type of body. Some aliens needed water to breathe. Others were made of pure energy. A few looked like giant insects. Today they were talking about humans. The human request sat on the main table like a piece of garbage. Nobody wanted to touch. Ambassador Krellanox from the Zephyrian Empire looked at the papers with disgust. His body was made of blue light that shifted and moved like flames. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind through metal pipes. These creatures want to join our council, Krellanox said. His light body flickered with anger. They have been in space for only 200 years. My people have traveled between stars for 50,000 years. The other aliens nodded. Ambassador Vexthal from the Hegemony clicked his forearms together. He looked like a giant mantis with silver skin. His large black eyes reflected the light from the neutron star outside. I have read their files, he said. They still use chemical rockets to move small ships. Their biggest warships are only 2 kilometers long. They power them with antimatter, which we stopped using 10,000 years ago. A laugh came from the water section of the hall. Ambassador Glubrex floated in a tank of purple liquid. She was from the Aquatic Federation and looked like a jellyfish with too many tentacles. They mine asteroids by blowing them up with explosives, she said. The liquid around her bubbled with her laughter. My children play with more advanced tools than these humans use for their biggest projects. The insect-like Kithara delegate stood up on her 6 legs. Queen Voice Zixara was 3 meters tall and covered in golden armor that was actually part of her body. When she spoke, her voice came from speakers built into her chest because her mouth was too alien for others to understand. The data shows they have spread to 47 star systems, Zixara said. This is normal for a young species. But they build their colonies in strange places. Many are in empty space between stars where there are no planets or resources. This shows poor planning and waste of energy. Ambassador Thielwyn from the Ethereal Collective made a sound like singing glass. His body was transparent and filled with moving lights. Perhaps they are simply confused about how to build proper colonies. Young species often make such mistakes. They will learn better methods in time. The debate continued for 3 hours. Each alien race took turns explaining why humans were not ready to join the council. The crystalline mind said humans thought too slowly. The energy beings said humans were too tied to physical matter. The machine intelligence said human technology was like toys compared to real science. Finally, Supreme Coordinator Dalthex called for order. He was from the First People, the oldest race in the galaxy. His species looked almost human, but with gray skin and large black eyes. They had been in space longer than any other race and helped start the Galactic Council millions of years ago. We have heard all arguments, Dalthex said. His voice was quiet, but everyone listened. Now we must vote. All in favor of accepting the human petition for council membership. Silence filled the hall. Not one hand, tentacle, or appendage was raised. All opposed? Every delegate raised their vote. The decision was clear and final. The human petition is denied, Dalthex announced. They will be classified as a developing species under Protocol 7. A quarantine boundary will be established around their current territory. They may not expand beyond this boundary until they prove they are ready for contact with advanced civilizations. Ambassador Vexthal stood up and walked to the communication panel. His silver claws clicked against the controls as he prepared the message that would be sent to Earth. I will make the announcement simple so they can understand it, he said. The other aliens laughed. Even the serious ones like Dalthex smiled a little. The idea that these primitive humans might one day challenge the great powers of the galaxy was amusing to think about. Tell them to develop their technology for another 1,000 years, suggested Krellanox. Perhaps by then they will discover How to manipulate gravity or energy in useful ways? 1,000 years might not be enough, said Queen Voice 6ara. My people needed 3,000 years to develop from chemical rockets to our current bioships. Humans may need even longer since they seem to waste so much effort on pointless projects. The message was sent within an hour. It traveled faster than light through the Council's communication network, reaching Earth in just a few minutes. The human leaders would read it and understand their place in the galaxy. They were children playing with dangerous toys, and the adults had decided they needed more time to grow up. But the real decision was about more than just membership. Supreme Coordinator Dalthex called a private meeting with the military commanders after the main session ended. Admiral Thane of the Council Defense Force attended by hologram from his flagship. He was from the hegemony like Vexthal, but bigger and covered in battle scars. The quarantine must be enforced, Dalthex said. These humans have a history of violence and rapid expansion. Their own planet shows signs of terrible wars in their recent past. We cannot let such aggressive tendencies spread to other star systems. Admiral Thane's image flickered as he checked his fleet positions. I've already moved 300 capital ships to the quarantine boundary. Each ship is capable of destroying a planet if needed. The humans will not be able to leave their assigned space without us knowing immediately. Good, said Dalthex. But remember, we are not trying to destroy them. They may become useful allies in a few thousand years if they learn wisdom. The quarantine is for their protection as much as ours. The meeting ended, and the aliens went back to their normal business. The galaxy was a big place with many problems. There were the Void Devourers in the Outer Rim, ancient machines that ate dark matter and left dead space behind them. The Psionic Collective was having a civil war that might spread to other sectors. Several star systems were dealing with reality storms that made faster-than-light travel impossible. Humans were the least important problem the Council faced. They were just another young species that needed time to grow up. The galaxy had seen thousands of such species over millions of years. Most eventually became useful members of galactic civilization. A few destroyed themselves. Some, like humans, just needed patient guidance and firm boundaries. Admiral Thane returned to his flagship and gave orders to his fleet. The ships spread out along the boundary of human space like a fence. Each ship was a biological construct grown rather than built, shaped like a giant sea creature with weapons that could crack moons. The crews were volunteers from many different species, all trained to watch for signs of human expansion. Set up the monitoring stations, Admiral Thane ordered. I want to know every time a human ship moves between their star systems. If they try to cross the boundary, disable their engines and send them back. Do not harm them unless they attack. First, but make sure they understand the boundary is real. The monitoring stations were placed in empty space around human territory. They used advanced sensors to watch for ships, energy signatures, and communication signals. The technology was so advanced that humans would never detect it. To human eyes, the boundary of their space would look completely empty. Over the following weeks, the stations began sending reports. Human ships were moving between their colonies as expected. The energy signatures matched the files perfectly. Chemical rockets for small ships, fusion drives for medium ships, and antimatter engines for their largest vessels. Everything was exactly as primitive as the Council had predicted. They are following normal development patterns, Admiral Thane reported to his superiors. Slow expansion, resource gathering, no attempts to cross the boundary. They seem to have accepted their situation. This was good news for the Council. It meant the humans were reasonable enough to understand when they were outmatched. It also meant they might eventually become useful allies instead of a threat that needed to be eliminated. The galaxy continued its normal routine. The Council met every month to discuss problems and make decisions. The quarantine around human space became just another item on a long list of things the military had to monitor. After a few months, most Council members forgot that humans existed at all. Only the monitoring stations continued to watch. Their automated systems recorded every human ship movement, every energy pulse, every radio transmission. The data was stored in vast databases that few beings ever looked at. As long as humans stayed in their assigned space and continued to develop slowly, there was no reason for anyone to pay attention to them. The galaxy was peaceful, at least in the sectors controlled by the Council. The great alien civilizations continued their ancient work of exploring space, developing new technologies and maintaining order among the younger species. Humans were just one small part of a much larger picture, a minor species quarantined in a small corner of space while they learned to behave like civilized beings. None of the great powers suspected that anything unusual was happening in human space. The monitoring stations reported normal activity, and normal activity was all anyone expected from such a primitive species. The idea that humans might be developing technologies beyond Council understanding was impossible to consider. After all, what could a species with only 200 years of spaceflight possibly discover that civilizations with millions of years of experience had missed? 50 years passed since the Galactic Council had quarantined human space. Admiral Thane still commanded the defense fleet that watched the boundary. He was older now, his silver skin marked with more scars from battles in other parts of the galaxy, but the human boundary had been quiet for so long that most of his attention went to other threats. The monitoring stations sent their reports every day. Human ships moved between their star systems in predictable patterns. Trade vessels carried goods from one colony to another. Passenger ships brought people to new worlds. Military ships patrolled their territory but never came close to the boundary. Everything looked normal for a developing species. "The humans are expanding exactly as we predicted," Admiral Thane told his aide, Commander Ythal. Ythal was an ethereal, her transparent body floating beside his command chair. Lights moved through her like slow lightning as she processed information. "They now control 93 star systems," Ythal reported. "Their population has grown to over 400 billion across all their colonies. They have built 17 major shipyards and countless mining operations." Admiral Thane nodded. "Standard growth pattern for a quarantined species. They are using their time wisely to develop their territory instead of trying to break out and cause trouble." The reports showed that humans had built many space stations. Some were research facilities where they studied science. Others were manufacturing centers that built ships and equipment. A few were military bases that protected important star systems. All of this was normal behavior that the Council expected, but there were some strange details in the reports that nobody paid much attention to. Humans built many of their facilities in empty space between star systems. The monitoring stations recorded these construction projects but marked them as inefficient resource use. Why build something where there were no planets or asteroids to mine? "They are still using the same primitive technologies," Commander Ythal observed. "Chemical rockets, fusion drives, antimatter engines. Their energy signatures have not changed in 50 years. This was seen as proof that humans were developing slowly and safely. Fast technological growth was often dangerous for young species. Many had destroyed themselves by advancing too quickly without wisdom to control their power. The fact that humans were taking their time was actually good news. Admiral Thane reviewed the detailed sensor data from the monitoring stations. Human ships still moved at the same speeds they had 50 years ago. Their weapons were still kinetic, projectiles and energy beams powered by fusion reactors. Their largest warships were still only a few kilometers long. Nothing had changed except the number of ships and colonies. "Continue standard monitoring," Admiral Thane ordered. "The humans are not a threat? Focus our main attention on the Void Devourers in Sector 97. The Void Devourers were a much bigger problem than quarantined humans. These ancient machines had appeared at the edge of the galaxy and were eating their way inward. They consumed dark matter somehow, leaving behind regions of space where reality itself seemed broken. 3 star systems had already been destroyed, their matter simply vanishing as if it had never existed. Council scientists could not understand how the Void Devourers worked. The machines were older than any known civilization and used technologies that made no sense. They moved through space without engines, manipulated matter without tools, and communicated in ways that hurt the minds of those who tried to listen. "We need every available ship to stop them," Admiral Thane told his fleet commanders during their weekly meeting. "The humans can wait. They have been quiet for 50 years and will probably stay quiet for 50 more. The galaxy had many other problems besides the Void Devourers. The psionic collective was splitting into warring factions that attacked each other with weapons made of pure thought. The crystalline minds had discovered something in deep space that made them go silent for months at a time. Reality storms were appearing in several sectors, making faster-than-light travel impossible and cutting off entire civilizations. With so many crises happening, the Council barely thought about humans anymore. The quarterly reports about human space were filed away without being read. As long as the monitoring stations showed normal activity, nobody cared what the humans were doing inside their quarantine zone. But the monitoring stations were not as perfect as the Council believed. They were designed to watch for known technologies and energy signatures. When human ships used fusion drives, the stations detected them perfectly. When humans built space stations with normal power sources, every detail was recorded. However, the stations had trouble with things they were not programmed to recognize. Strange gravitational fluctuations in empty space were marked as natural phenomena. Unusual patterns in background radiation were ignored as sensor noise. Areas where space itself seemed slightly bent were explained as effects from nearby stars. Deep in human space, things were happening that the monitoring stations could not understand. In the void between star systems, where humans had built those supposedly inefficient facilities, the fabric of space was being changed in ways that Council science had never imagined. Dr. Yelena was the Council's greatest expert on space physics. Her crystalline body contained a brain that had been calculating stellar mechanics for 10,000 years. She reviewed the data from human space every year as part of her research into reality storms and other space anomalies. "There are some unusual readings from the quarantine zone," she told her research team. "Gravitational waves that do not match any known source. Dark matter density variations that seem too regular to be natural. Background radiation patterns that appear artificial." Her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Keftil, examined the data with his energy-based senses. Could the humans be causing these effects with their primitive technology? Dr. Yelonith's crystal body flashed with the equivalent of laughter. "Impossible. These readings suggest manipulation of dark matter and dark energy on enormous scales. Humans barely understand normal matter. They could not possibly affect the 95% of the universe made of dark components." The strange readings were filed away as unexplained natural phenomena. After all, space was full of things that science did not yet understand. The galaxy was ancient and vast, containing mysteries that even the oldest civilizations had not solved. A few odd sensor readings from human space were not worth investigating, when there were so many more important problems to deal with. Meanwhile, human merchant ships continued their regular routes between colonies. The monitoring stations tracked every vessel and recorded every energy signature. The ships looked exactly the same as they had 50 years ago. They moved at the same speeds, used the same power sources, and carried the same types of cargo. What the monitoring stations did not detect were the modifications hidden inside those familiar ships. Human engineers had learned to hide advanced systems behind facades of primitive technology. New engines that bent space-time were wrapped in fusion reactor housings. Navigation computers that used dark matter calculations were disguised as simple stellar positioning systems. The humans had also learned to communicate in ways the monitoring stations could not intercept. Messages were encoded in gravitational wave patterns that looked like natural cosmic background noise. Information was passed through quantum entanglement networks that operated faster than light without creating detectable energy signatures. Captain Sarah Chun of the merchant vessel Longshot made her regular run between Earth and the Proxima Centauri colonies. To outside observers, her ship looked like a standard human freighter with fusion engines and chemical maneuvering thrusters. The monitoring stations recorded her passage and filed it under routine commercial traffic. But Captain Chen's ship was not what it appeared to be. Hidden beneath its ordinary hull were systems that could manipulate dark matter, bend space-time, and tap into energy sources that Council science considered impossible. The cargo she carried was not just manufactured goods and food supplies. It was also equipment for projects that were changing the very structure of space in human territory. Another successful run, Captain Chun reported to her hidden contacts. The message was sent through quantum channels that the monitoring stations could not detect. The new facility in the Ross 128 system is operational. Dark matter density has been increased by a factor of 10,000 in the construction zone. Similar reports came from hundreds of other human ships making regular trips throughout their territory. Each carried hidden technology and secret cargo. Each contributed to projects that were reshaping space itself in ways the Council had never imagined possible. The humans had learned something during their 50 years of isolation. When the galaxy's greatest powers looked down on you as primitive and harmless, they stopped paying close attention to what you were really doing. They saw what they expected to see and ignored everything else as impossible. Admiral Thane received his monthly report about human space and glanced at it briefly before filing it away. Still no change in human activity, he noted with satisfaction. They continue to develop at a safe and steady pace. No attempts to break quarantine or develop dangerous technologies. He had no idea that human space was no longer just a collection of star systems with planets and space stations. The void between the stars had been filled with structures made of dark matter and held together by controlled gravitational fields. Installations the size of gas giants hung invisible in empty space, processing dark energy and building machines from the fabric of space-time itself. The humans had spent 50 years learning about the 95% of the universe that most species ignored. While the Council focused on normal matter and energy, humans had discovered how to work with dark matter and dark energy. They had built a civilization that existed mostly in the hidden parts of reality that conventional sensors could not detect. But they were careful to maintain the illusion of primitive technology. Their visible ships and stations still used familiar energy sources and moved at predictable speeds. Their communications still used radio waves and laser transmissions that the monitoring stations could intercept. Their colonies still looked like normal settlements on planets and asteroids. The deception was perfect because it gave the Council exactly what they expected to see. A young species developing slowly and staying within their assigned boundaries. Primitive humans who knew their place in the galaxy and were content to build their small civilization in the space they had been given. Nobody suspected that humanity had been using their time of isolation to become something unprecedented in galactic history. They were building a civilization based on technologies that the Council's greatest scientists considered impossible. They were preparing for the day when they would no longer need to hide behind primitive facades. But for now, they waited and built and learned. The galaxy thought they were children playing with simple toys. Soon, the galaxy would discover what those children had really been doing during their 50 years of quiet development. The emergency alarm rang through the Galactic Council chambers like a scream. Supreme Coordinator Dalthex had not heard this sound in over 300 years. It meant something terrible was happening across multiple sectors at the same time. He rushed to the main hall where other Council members were already gathering in panic. Ambassador Krelinox flickered into the chamber, his energy body crackling with fear. "My colonies in the outer spiral are gone," he announced. "Not destroyed, gone. They were there yesterday, and today there is nothing but empty space." Queen Voice 6 clicked her claws together nervously. "The same has happened to 3 of my hive worlds. Our monitoring stations detected massive gravitational distortions, then silence. When our scout ships arrived, they found empty space where planets used to be. More reports flooded in as representatives from across the galaxy shared similar stories. Entire star systems had experienced impossible phenomena. Planets had vanished without trace. Space itself seemed to be bending and twisting in ways that broke the laws of physics. Most disturbing of all, the attacks were happening simultaneously. Across distances of tens of thousands of light years, Fleet, Admiral Zexstar of the Hegemony military appeared as a hologram in the center of the chamber. His silver skin was pale with fear and his forearms shook as he presented the data. "We have confirmed attacks in 47 different sectors," he reported. "The pattern is always the same. Massive gravitational anomalies appear from nowhere. Reality becomes unstable, then everything returns to normal except the targets are simply gone." Dalthek studied the star map showing the affected areas. Red marks indicated where attacks had occurred. The pattern seemed random at first, but something about it bothered him. "Show me the timeline," he ordered. The holographic display changed to show when each attack had happened. Dalthek's ancient mind, trained by millions of years of experience, immediately saw what others had missed. "These are not random attacks," he said quietly. "They are coordinated. Whatever is doing this can strike anywhere in the galaxy at exactly the same time." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. No known technology could achieve instant communication across such vast distances. Even the Council's fastest ships needed weeks to travel between the attacked sectors. Yet somehow, an unknown force had launched perfectly timed strikes across half the galaxy. Dr. Yelenith materialized in her designated space, her crystalline body flashing with urgent calculations. "I have analyzed the gravitational data from 17 attack sites," she announced. "The readings are impossible according to everything we know about physics. Someone is manipulating dark matter and dark energy on scales we believed were purely theoretical." Ambassador Glubrex rose from her water tank, tentacles writhing with anxiety. Could this be the work of the Void Devourers? They consume dark matter somehow. "No," Dr. Yelenith replied immediately. "The Void Devourers leave areas of dead space where reality breaks down. These attacks show precise control over space-time itself. Whoever is doing this understands dark matter physics better than our greatest scientists." The debate continued for hours as the Council tried to understand what they were facing. Theories were proposed and dismissed. The energy being suggested it might be a natural phenomenon, but the coordination argued against that. The machine intelligence calculated that no known species had the technology for such attacks. The psionic collective wondered if it could be a new form of mental warfare. But the physical effects were too real. Then the transmission arrived. It came through every communication network in the galaxy simultaneously. Radio waves, quantum entanglement, channels, gravitational wave transmitters, even the organic neural networks used by bioships. Every device capable of receiving information suddenly carried the same signal from the same source. The source coordinates made the Council chamber fall completely silent. The transmission was coming from Sol System, the home of the quarantined humans. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Dark Fleet," the voice said. It spoke in perfect translation to every language in the galaxy, somehow knowing exactly how to communicate with each species. "You have 72 standard hours to lift the quarantine around human space and formally recognize humanity's sovereignty over all territories we have claimed." The image that accompanied the voice showed a human female in military uniform, standing on what appeared to be a ship's bridge. Behind her, large windows showed the familiar sight of space filled with stars. But something was wrong with the view. The stars were too bright, too close, and arranged in patterns that made no sense. "We have been patient during our 50 years of isolation," Admiral Chun continued. "We used that time to study the universe and develop technologies that you apparently overlooked. We have tried to remain peaceful, but your refusal to recognize our rights has forced us to take action." Ambassador Vexthal stood up in rage, his mantis-like body trembling. "Impossible! Humans do not have the technology for galaxy-wide communication. Their most advanced ships barely reach 1% of light speed." Admiral Chun seemed to hear him, though that should have been impossible during a one-way transmission. She smiled slightly. Your monitoring stations have been watching our old technology for 50 years. We kept using those primitive ships and power sources because we knew you were watching. But we also learned to build things you could not see. The transmission changed to show views from across human space. But these were not the familiar colonies and space stations that the monitoring reports had described. Instead, the images showed structures that defied understanding. Vast constructs made of invisible material filled the void between stars. Ships the size of moons moved without visible engines. Space itself seemed to be folded and shaped like clay in the hands of a sculptor. Dark matter and dark energy make up 95% of the universe, Admiral Chun explained. Your species have spent millions of years playing with the tiny fraction of reality made of normal matter. We spent 50 years learning to work with the rest of it. Dr. Yelenis. Crystalline body flashed rapidly as her mind tried to process what she was seeing. Those structures are impossible, she whispered. Dark matter cannot be manipulated directly. It barely interacts with normal matter at all. You thought it was impossible because you tried to manipulate dark matter using normal matter tools. Admiral Chung replied, again seeming to respond to words she should not have been able to hear. We learned to build tools from dark matter itself. Once you can work with the fabric of space-time directly, many things become possible. The images continued to show impossible sights. Human facilities that existed in folded space, occupying the same location as normal space but somehow separate from it. Weapons that fired concentrated gravity waves capable of erasing matter from existence. Ships that moved by rewriting the laws of physics around themselves. Your attacks on our colonies were demonstrations, Dalthek said, his voice barely audible. He had finally understood what was happening. Admiral Chun nodded. We removed several small installations from normal spacetime and stored them safely in folded dimensions. No one was harmed, but we wanted to show you what we are capable of. The colonies can be returned to normal space whenever we choose. But the coordination across such vast distances, Fleet Admiral Zexstar protested. Dark matter exists everywhere, Admiral Chun explained patiently. When you learn to work with it properly, distance becomes irrelevant. We can communicate instantly across the entire galaxy and beyond. We can strike anywhere at any time. We can make entire star systems disappear and bring them back at will. The council chamber erupted in frightened voices as representatives realized the implications. Humanity had not just developed new technology during their quarantine. They had apparently transcended the physical limitations that bound every other species in the galaxy. What do you want? Dalthex asked when order was finally restored. Recognition, Admiral Chun said simply. We want the quarantine lifted immediately. We want formal acknowledgement of human sovereignty over the space we have claimed. And we want to be treated as equals, not as primitive children who need supervision. And if we refuse? Ambassador Krellinox demanded, his energy body blazing with anger. Admiral Chun's expression became cold. Then you will discover exactly how much of the galaxy we have already claimed while you were not paying attention. The empty space between your star systems is not as empty as you think. We have been building there for 50 years. She gestured to the windows behind her, and the view changed to show the interior of what she called her flagship. The council representatives gasped as they realized the scale of what they were seeing. The bridge was not inside a ship. It was built into space itself, with the orbits of planets serving as corridors and the asteroid belts as defensive positions. This is our latest flagship, Admiral Chun said with pride. We call it Sol. It used to be a star system, but we found better uses for it. The dark matter density here is now 10,000 times normal. Every cubic meter of space contains machinery you cannot see and weapons you cannot imagine. The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. For several minutes, no one spoke. The greatest powers in the galaxy had just been threatened by a species they had dismissed as primitive children 50 years ago. Finally, Ambassador Vexthal found his voice. This must be some kind of trick. Humans cannot possibly have such Technology. Our monitoring stations would have detected it. Your monitoring stations have been detecting exactly what we wanted them to detect, came another voice. This time it was transmitted directly through the quantum communication networks in the council chamber itself, proving that human technology could reach anywhere they chose. Dr. Yeloneth ran calculations frantically, trying to understand how any of this was possible. If they can manipulate dark matter as they claim, she said slowly, then they have access to energy sources beyond our comprehension. Dark energy is what drives the expansion of the universe itself. If they can control that force, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Everyone in the chamber understood the implication. A species that could control dark energy could reshape reality itself. They could make stars, destroy galaxies, or rewrite the laws of physics on a whim. 72 hours, Dothex repeated quietly. They have given us 72 hours to decide. The emergency session began immediately. Messages were sent to every member species, every fleet commander, every scientific institution in the galaxy. The greatest minds in known space were called upon to analyze the human claims and determine if they were real. But deep down, every council member already knew the truth. The coordinated attacks, the galaxy-wide communication, the impossible technology they had been shown, it was all real. Humanity had somehow become the most powerful force in the galaxy while everyone was looking the other way. The quarantine that was supposed to contain them had instead given them time to develop in secret. The monitoring that was supposed to watch their every move had failed completely. And now the children that the council had dismissed as harmless were holding a gun to the galaxy's head. The countdown had begun. In 72 hours, the council would have to decide whether to accept humanity as an equal power or face the consequences of their 50 years of arrogance. For the first time in galactic history, the mighty council was not making demands. They were being given an ultimatum by the species they had looked down upon for so long. And everyone in that chamber knew they had no choice but to accept. Admiral Thane had commanded the Council Defense Fleet for over 200 years. He had fought against space pirates, alien invaders, and cosmic disasters, but he had never faced an enemy that claimed to control the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The human ultimatum felt like a bad joke that had gone too far. "Prepare the fleet for immediate departure," he ordered his bridge crew. "We are going to Sol System to end this madness before it spreads." His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was a masterpiece of Council military engineering. The bioorganic vessel was grown rather than built, its living hull capable of healing damage and adapting to new threats. At 15 kilometers long, it was one of the largest warships ever created. Its weapons could crack planets and its shields could absorb the energy of a supernova dot behind the Eternal Dominion, 499. Other capital ships prepared for the journey to human space. Each one represented millions of years of accumulated knowledge and technology. The combined fleet had enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems if necessary. The humans have somehow developed impressive illusion technology, Admiral Thane told his commanders during the final briefing. They want us to believe they can manipulate dark matter and control gravity itself, but we know this is impossible. No species has ever learned to work with dark forces directly. Captain Veltar of the bioship Void Hunter nodded agreement. His crystalline body reflected the lights of the holographic display. Our scientists have studied dark matter for millions of years. It barely interacts with normal matter at all. The idea that primitive humans could learn to control it in 50 years is absurd. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel and headed toward Sol System. The journey would take 3 days at maximum speed. During that time, Admiral Thane reviewed every piece of data about human technology and capabilities. Nothing he saw suggested they were capable of the feats they claimed. Their largest ships are still only 2 kilometers long, he noted while studying the intelligence reports. Their weapons are still kinetic projectiles and energy beams. Their power sources are still fusion and antimatter reactors. Everything matches the data from 50 years ago. Commander Yeathal floated beside his command chair, her ethereal body pulsing with information processing. The monitoring stations confirm no change in human technology signatures. Whatever they are doing to create these illusions, they are using their old equipment to do it. This made Admiral Thane feel more confident about the coming confrontation. Humans might have learned some new tricks with holographic projections and communication networks, but they could not change the basic laws of physics. When faced with real military power, their deceptions would crumble quickly. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol system and immediately began scanning for human defenses. What they found was exactly what the monitoring stations had been reporting for 50 years. Human colonies on the planets, space stations orbiting the major worlds, and civilian traffic moving between them on predictable schedules. I see merchant ships, passenger vessels, and a few patrol craft, reported the sensor officer. Nothing that could threaten even our smallest escort ships. The human military appears to be hiding behind their planets. Admiral Thane studied the tactical display with growing confusion. Where was the mighty dark fleet that Admiral Chun had boasted about? Where were the impossible weapons and reality-bending technology? All he could see were the same primitive human settlements that had existed for decades. Begin scanning for hidden installations, he ordered. The humans must be using stealth technology to hide their real military assets. The fleet's sensors probed deeper into the system, looking for concealed bases or cloaked ships. The most advanced detection systems in the galaxy searched every cubic meter of space around Sol, but they found nothing unusual except for some strange background readings that did not match any known technology. Sir, we are detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations throughout the system, the science officer reported. The patterns are too regular to be natural, but they do not match any known artificial sources either. Admiral Thane frowned at the data. The gravitational readings were indeed strange, but they were also very subtle. Whatever was causing them was either very far away or very well hidden. Continue scanning, and send a message to the human leadership demanding their immediate surrender. The message was transmitted on standard radio frequencies toward Earth. Within minutes, a reply came back from Admiral Sarah Chun herself. Her image appeared on the main screen, showing her standing in what looked like a normal ship's bridge. "Welcome to Sol System, Admiral Thane," she said with a slight smile. "I hope you enjoyed your journey here. It will probably be your last trip anywhere if you continue on your current course." "Enough of these games," Admiral Thane replied angrily. "We have 500 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your primitive vessels cannot possibly threaten us. Surrender now, and we will allow your species to continue existing under proper supervision." Admiral Chun's smile grew wider. "Primitive vessels? Is that what you think you're seeing?" She gestured to something off-screen and the view behind. Her changed dramatically. Instead of a normal bridge, the display now showed Admiral Chun standing in what appeared to be an enormous command center. Through transparent walls, Admiral Thane could see the curve of planetary orbits and the distant glow of the sun. The scale was impossible. The bridge seemed to be embedded in space itself, using entire planets as reference points. "You are currently inside our newest flagship," Admiral Chun explained calmly. "We call it Sol, after the star that used to power this system. That star still exists, but it now serves as the primary reactor for our defensive grid." Admiral Thane's sensor officer suddenly spoke up in a panicked voice. "Sir, the gravitational readings are changing. The fluctuations are getting stronger and more organized. It's almost like the space around us is moving." "That's because it is moving," Admiral Chun said, somehow hearing the report despite the fact that human technology should not have been able to intercept Council communications. "You see, when you learn to work with dark matter properly, you realize that empty space is not really empty at all. It's full of invisible infrastructure that conventional sensors cannot detect." The tactical display on Admiral Thane's ship began showing impossible readings. Space itself seemed to be bending and twisting around the fleet. Gravitational fields that had no visible source were pulling at his ships from multiple directions. The background radiation was forming patterns that looked almost like circuit diagrams spanning the entire solar system. "This is impossible," Admiral Thane muttered. "Space cannot be manipulated like this. You would need energy sources comparable to entire stars." "We have energy sources comparable to entire galaxies," Admiral Chung replied matter-of-factly. "Dark energy drives the expansion of the universe itself. When you learn to tap into that force, stellar-level power becomes trivial to generate." Suddenly, something appeared on the tactical sensors that made Admiral Thane's blood freeze in his veins. Ships were materializing around his fleet, not approaching from a distance, but simply coming into existence from apparently empty space. They were enormous, dwarfing even the largest council vessels. Some were the size of small moons, their hulls seeming to be made of crystallized space-time itself. Where did they come from? Admiral Thane demanded of his sensor operators. "Unknown, sir. They were not there a moment ago, and now they are. Our sensors show no energy signatures, no propulsion systems, no power sources. It's as if they are made of the vacuum of space itself." More ships continued to appear until Admiral Thane's fleet was completely surrounded. The human vessels did not look like anything in council records. Their hulls were transparent in some places and mirror-bright in others. Parts of them seemed to exist in normal space while other sections flickered in and out of visibility as if they were only partially real. "These are impossible ships," Admiral Thane said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing this large could be built or powered with any known technology." "You keep using that word impossible," Admiral Chun observed. "But you are looking at the ships with your own sensors. How can something be impossible if it is clearly happening right in front of you?" Admiral Thane tried to regain his composure. Even if the humans had somehow built these massive vessels, they were still outnumbered. His fleet had 500 ships, while he could only count about 50 human vessels on his sensors. "You may have impressive ships, but we still outnumber you 10 to 1, he declared. "Our combined firepower can destroy anything you have built." "Numbers only matter if you understand what you are counting," Admiral Chun replied. "You are counting ships that exist in normal space-time. But what if I told you that each of our vessels exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously? What if a single ship can attack you from a dozen different locations at once?" As she spoke, the human ships began to demonstrate capabilities that shattered Admiral Thane's understanding of physics. Individual vessels split into multiple copies of themselves, each copy attacking from a different angle. Others seemed to fold space around themselves, making it impossible to determine their actual location or size. "Sir, our targeting systems cannot lock onto them," the weapons officer reported in panic. "Every time we try to aim at one of their ships, it appears to be in a different place than our sensors indicate. Some of them seem to be occupying the same space as multiple different objects at once." The demonstration continued as human weapons came online. But these were not the familiar energy beams and kinetic projectiles that Council technology used. Instead, the human ships fired concentrated gravitational waves that erased matter from existence. They launched missiles made of folded space-time that could pass through shields as if they did not exist. Some weapons seemed to attack the past, causing damage before they were even fired. "Your shields and armor are designed to protect against normal matter and energy," Admiral Chun explained as the impossible weapons fire continued around the Council fleet without actually hitting them. "But we are not using normal matter and energy anymore. We are attacking you with the fundamental forces that hold reality together." Admiral Thane watched in horror as his tactical displays showed the true scope of what they were facing. The human vessels were not just larger than Council ships, they existed on scales that made comparison meaningless. Some appeared to be built into the structure of space itself, using entire star systems as components. Others seemed to exist in multiple universes at once, their weapons firing from dimensions that Council science had never even theorized about. "This is your final warning," Admiral Chun said. her voice now coming from every speaker on every ship in the Council fleet simultaneously. "Leave our space immediately and return to the Council with our demands. We are willing to coexist peacefully with other species, but we will not be quarantined or controlled by anyone." "And if we refuse?" Admiral Thane asked, though he already knew his fleet was completely outmatched. "Then you will discover what happens when a species that controls dark matter decides to stop being patient." Admiral Chun replied, "We can make your ships, your crews, and your entire civilization disappear as easily as we made our colonies vanish during our demonstration. The choice is yours." Admiral Thane looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Every one of them showed the same expression of terrified understanding. They were not facing a primitive species with impressive illusions. They were confronting a civilization that had transcended the normal laws of physics and gained power over the fundamental forces of existence itself. The humans had spent 50 years in isolation learning to manipulate the 95% of the universe that other species could not even detect. While the Council played with normal matter and energy, humanity had mastered dark matter and dark energy. They had built a civilization that existed mostly in the hidden dimensions of reality, invisible to conventional sensors but capable of reaching into normal space whenever they chose. "Recall all ships," Admiral Thane ordered quietly. "We are returning to Council space immediately." "But sir, our orders were based on the assumption that we were dealing with a primitive species," Admiral Thane interrupted. "We were wrong. We were completely, catastrophically wrong." As the Council fleet began its retreat, Admiral Chun's image appeared one final time on their screens. "Thank you for being reasonable, Admiral Thane. We look forward to productive negotiations with the Council once our terms have been accepted." The human ships faded back into invisibility as mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving the Council fleet alone with the terrifying knowledge that they had just encountered a species that made their most advanced technology look like primitive tools. Admiral Thane's report to the Council would be brief and to the point. Humanity was no longer a developing species in need of quarantine. They had become the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, and everyone else was now living in their shadow. The Galactic Council chambers had never been so quiet. Every representative sat in their designated spaces, but no one spoke. The holographic display in the center showed Admiral Thane's defeated fleet limping back toward Council space. Behind them, human space looked exactly the same as it had 50 years ago: peaceful colonies, civilian traffic, and no sign of the impossible weapons that had just humiliated the galaxy's greatest military force. "Supreme," Coordinator Dalthex broke the silence first. His ancient voice carried the weight of millions of years of galactic leadership, but now it sounded tired and uncertain. "Admiral Thane's report has been verified by all 500 ship commanders in his fleet. The humans possess technology that exceeds our understanding of physics." Ambassador Vexthal shifted nervously in his chair, his mantis-like body trembling. "How is this possible? Our monitoring stations showed no change in human capabilities for 50 years. They still use the same primitive ships and power sources they had when we quarantined them." "Because we were watching the wrong things," Dr. Yelena admitted. Her crystalline body flashed with embarrassed calculations. "We monitored normal matter and energy while they learned to work with dark matter and dark energy. We were like children, watching shadows on a wall while missing the real world around us." Queen Voice Ixara clicked her claws together in frustration. "Our greatest scientists spent millions of years trying to understand dark matter. How could a species with only 200 years of spaceflight succeed where we failed?" "Perhaps that is exactly why they succeeded," Dalthex replied thoughtfully. "We assumed dark matter was impossible to manipulate because our ancestors could not do it. The humans had no such assumptions. They approached the problem with fresh minds and no preconceptions about what was impossible." The debate continued for hours, but everyone knew the real question was not how humans had achieved their impossible technology. The question was what the Council would do about it. The 72-hour deadline was approaching rapidly, and humanity had already demonstrated they could destroy any military force sent against them. Ambassador, Krelonox flickered with angry energy. We cannot simply surrender to these upstart primitives. The Council has maintained order in this galaxy for millions of years. If we bow to human demands, every other species will think they can challenge our authority. What authority? Ambassador, Glubrex asked from her water tank. The humans just proved that all our military power is worthless against their technology. They can make our ships disappear with weapons we cannot even detect. How do we maintain authority over beings who can rewrite the laws of physics? The question hung in the air like a poisonous gas. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was faced with a species that was not just more advanced than them, but so far beyond their understanding that resistance seemed futile. Then the second human transmission arrived. This time, Admiral Sarah Chun did not wait for Council permission to speak. Her image simply appeared in the chamber's communication systems, bypassing every security protocol as if they did not exist. Behind her, the impossible vista of space folded into geometric patterns showed that she was still commanding from within the Sol system itself. "Greetings, Council members," she said with polite formality. "I hope you have had time to consider our terms. As a gesture of good faith, we have returned Admiral Thane's fleet undamaged to your space. We could have easily destroyed every ship, but we prefer to resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than violence." Dalthek stepped forward to respond. "Admiral Chun, the Council acknowledges that humanity possesses advanced technology. We are prepared to discuss the terms of your membership in galactic civilization." Admiral Chun smiled, but the expression was not entirely friendly. "I appreciate the diplomatic language, Coordinator Dalthex, but let me be clear about our position. We are not asking to join your civilization. We are informing you that we have already built our own civilization, and we expect you to respect our sovereignty within it." She gestured to something off-screen, and the display behind her changed to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Huge sections were highlighted in blue, indicating areas claimed by humanity. The Council representatives gasped as they realized the scope of what they were seeing. "These are the territories that humanity now claims as our sovereign space," Admiral Chun explained. "As you can see, they include not just the star systems where we have visible colonies, but also the vast regions of apparently empty space between those systems." Ambassador Vexthal stood up in shock. "Those empty regions cover nearly 30% of the galaxy. There is nothing there but vacuum and cosmic dust." "There is nothing there that your sensors can detect," Admiral Chun corrected. "But as we have learned, conventional sensors only show you the 5% of the universe made of normal matter. The other 95% is quite busy with human activity." The map zoomed in to show details of human-claimed space. What had appeared to be empty void was revealed to be filled with structures that defied imagination. Dark matter installations the size of solar systems connected by transportation networks that span thousands of light years. Cities built from crystallized space-time floated in the void between stars. Industrial complexes that processed dark energy on scales that dwarfed entire civilizations. "We have been expanding for 50 years, Admiral Chun continued. "Not just to new planets, but into dimensions of reality that your species never learned to access. We have built infrastructure in folded space, established colonies in parallel dimensions, and created transportation networks that exist outside normal spacetime." Dr. Yelenis's crystalline body flashed rapidly as she tried to process the implications. "If you can manipulate spacetime itself, then distance and travel time become meaningless. You could reach any point in the galaxy instantly." "We can reach any point in any galaxy instantly," Admiral Chun confirmed. "Dark energy exists everywhere in the universe. Once you learn to work with it properly, the entire cosmos becomes your neighborhood." The Council representatives sat in stunned silence as they realized that humanity had not just become more advanced than them. They had transcended the normal limitations of physical existence itself. While other species were confined to moving between stars at the speed of light, humans could step between dimensions and travel anywhere in the universe at will. What do you want from us? Dalthex asked quietly. Recognition and respect, Admiral. Chun replied. We want the quarantine lifted immediately. We want formal acknowledgement that human-claimed space is sovereign territory. And we want to establish peaceful diplomatic relations with any species that is willing to treat us as equals. And if species refuse to recognize your claims? Queen voice. Zixara asked nervously. Admiral Chun's expression became cold. Then they will discover what happens when they try to interfere with human operations in human space. We prefer peace, but we are fully prepared to defend our interests with whatever force is necessary. To demonstrate her point, she gestured again, and the galactic map changed to show the locations of major council military bases and fleets. Every installation was marked with a targeting indicator, showing that humanity could strike anywhere they chose with perfect accuracy. Your monitoring systems never detected our expansion because we built most of our infrastructure in dimensions that your science considers impossible, Admiral Chun explained. But that same infrastructure gives us the ability to project power anywhere in normal space whenever we need to. Every council world, every military base, every important installation is currently within range of our defensive systems. The threat was clear, but it was delivered with such calm professionalism that it somehow seemed even more terrifying. Humanity was not making angry demands or issuing emotional ultimatums. They were simply stating facts about their capabilities and their intentions. We have prepared a formal treaty for your consideration, Admiral Chun continued. A document appeared on every council member's personal display, written in perfect translation for each species. The terms are simple. You recognize our sovereignty. Over claimed territories, you cease all attempts to monitor or interfere with human activities, and you establish normal diplomatic relations with the Terran Confederation. Dalthex reviewed the treaty quickly. The terms were surprisingly reasonable for a species that could dictate whatever they wanted. Humanity was not demanding tribute or submission. They were not trying to conquer other species or expand into occupied territories. They simply wanted to be left alone to develop their civilization in peace. In return, Admiral Chun added, we offer to share some of our knowledge with species that prove themselves trustworthy. We have learned much about the universe during our 50 years of isolation, and we believe that knowledge should eventually benefit all intelligent life. The offer was tempting, but several council members remained skeptical. Ambassador Krylonix's energy body flickered with suspicion. How do we know you will honor this treaty? You have the power to destroy us all. What prevents you from simply taking whatever you want? Because we are not conquerors, Admiral Chun replied firmly. We are explorers and builders. We spent 50 years learning to work with the universe instead of fighting against it. We prefer cooperation to conflict whenever possible. She paused and looked directly at each council member in turn. But make no mistake, we will defend ourselves if attacked. We will protect our people if threatened. And we will enforce our territorial claims if they are violated. We have been patient for 50 years, but our patience has limits. The treaty vote was held immediately. There was no real debate because everyone understood the situation. Humanity had become the dominant power in the galaxy whether the Council liked it or not. The only choice was whether to accept this reality peacefully or face the consequences of resistance. The vote was unanimous. Every species, even those that harbored resentment about the sudden change in galactic power balance, recognized that opposition was futile. The treaty was signed with ceremonial formality, but everyone knew it was really a surrender document. Thank you for your wisdom, Admiral Chun said when the signing was complete. The Terran Confederation looks forward to peaceful relations with all Council species. We hope this marks the beginning of a new era of cooperation and mutual understanding. The transmission ended, leaving the Council members alone with their thoughts. In the space of 72 hours, their ancient civilization had been relegated to secondary status by a species they had dismissed as primitive children. But as the shock wore off, some Council members began to see opportunities in the new situation. Humanity offered to share their knowledge with trustworthy species. The chance to learn about dark matter manipulation and dimensional technology was worth more than wounded pride. Ambassador Glubrex was the first to speak after Admiral Chun's transmission ended. Perhaps this change is not entirely negative. We have been stagnant for millions of years, using the same technologies and following the same patterns. The humans may force us to grow and develop in ways we never considered. Or they may eliminate us if we prove inconvenient, Ambassador Vexthal replied darkly. Then we must prove ourselves convenient, Dalthex said with finality. The age of council dominance is over. The age of human leadership has begun. We can either adapt to this new reality or be left behind by species that do. Over the following weeks, the galaxy began to adjust to its new reality. The quarantine around human space was lifted with great ceremony. Diplomatic missions were established between humanity and various council species. Trade agreements were negotiated for technologies and resources that both sides could benefit from. But everyone understood the real situation. Humanity had not joined galactic civilization. They had conquered it without firing a shot. They had achieved dominance not through military force, but by transcending the physical limitations that bound everyone else. The age of human galactic supremacy had begun not with invasion or conquest, but with the quiet realization that while other species had been playing politics with the 5% of the universe they could see, humanity had claimed ownership of the 95% that remained invisible. The galaxy would never be the same again. And in the depths of space, in dimensions that conventional science could not detect, human civilization continued to grow and expand into realms of possibility that no other species had ever imagined. The children that the council had dismissed as primitive had become the adults who now shaped the destiny of the entire galaxy.
The communication room of the Zephyrian High Command buzzed with activity. Tall, blue-skinned officers moved between glowing screens and control panels. Their forearms worked quickly as they processed incoming messages from across the galaxy. The war against the Void Swarm had been going badly for months now. Entire star systems had gone dark. Billions of lives had been lost. Commander Vextai stood at the center of the room. His large black eyes scanned the displays showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where the Void Swarm had struck. There were too many red zones. Far too many. Commander, called out Lieutenant Zerani from her station. We have intercepted human communications. They are responding to the Coalition's call for help. Vextai turned his attention to the young officer. The humans were still new to galactic politics. They had only made contact with the greater galaxy 30 years ago. Most species still did not take them seriously. What is their response? Vextai asked. Lieutenant Zerani looked confused as she read the message. Sir, they say they are sending military aid. But the details are strange. Strange how? They mention only one ship, sir. A vessel called the Indomitable. The communication room fell silent. Officers stopped their work and stared at Lieutenant Zerani. Vextai felt his stomach drop. One ship? He repeated. Are you certain the translation is correct? Yes, sir. I have checked it 3 times. The humans are sending one ship to help fight the Void Swarm. Murmurs spread through the room. Some officers laughed. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Vextai raised a hand for silence. Send this information to Ambassador Kethvar immediately, he ordered. The Galactic Council needs to know about this. 3 hours later, Ambassador Kethvar stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species. Each had contributed hundreds, sometimes thousands of ships to the fight against the Void Swarm. Ambassador Kethvar was a hegemony noble. His crystalline skin reflected the chamber's lights as he spoke. His voice carried the authority of his ancient civilization. Fellow counselors, he began, we have received word from the humans regarding their contribution to our military effort. A ripple of attention moved through the chamber. The humans were known for their unusual approaches to problems. Some found it amusing. Others found it annoying. The humans claim they will send military aid, Kethvar continued. However, they plan to send only one ship. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates from various species began talking at once. Some laughed openly. Others seemed angry. Counselor Threx of the Mantid Collective stood up. His insect-like body clicked as he moved. One ship? Are the humans mocking us? Do they not understand the scale of this threat? Ambassador Kethvar nodded. My thoughts exactly, Counselor Threx. Either the humans are showing incredible arrogance, or they are admitting their military weakness. Fleet Admiral Gorthak of the Orcish Star Empire slammed his massive fist on his desk. The Void Swarm has destroyed 12 of my battle groups. Thousands of my finest warriors are dead. And the humans send one ship? Perhaps, he suggested Counselor Miralith of the Elven Enclaves, they simply do not have more ships to spare. They are a young species. Their industrial capacity may be limited. This suggestion drew nods from many delegates. It made sense. Humans had been isolated on their single world for most of their existence. They had only recently begun expanding into space. Ambassador Kethvar pulled up holographic displays showing the current coalition fleet. As you can see, our combined forces number over 8,000 vessels. The Crystalline Hegemony has contributed 1,500 ships. The Mantid Collective has provided 2,000. Even the smallest member species have sent at least 50 vessels. He paused for effect. And humanity sends one. Counselor Yixara of the Aquatic Federation spoke up. Her translation device converted her underwater speech into galactic common. Perhaps we should not judge too harshly. The humans have never participated in a galactic war before. They may not understand proper military protocol. Or, said Counselor Threx, they may be planning to observe and learn while others do the fighting. Some species prefer to gain knowledge rather than share risks. This comment drew angry murmurs from several delegates. The suggestion that humans might be cowards was serious. Ambassador Kethvar raised his hand for quiet. Whatever their reasons, we must work with what we have. The human vessel will join the fleet at the staging area near the Kepler Nebula. Fleet commanders will include it in their battle plans as appropriate. Admiral Gorthak snorted. One ship will not change our battle plans. It will barely register as a rounding error in our force calculations. Nevertheless, Kethvar said firmly, humanity is a member of the Galactic Coalition. We will treat their contribution with appropriate respect regardless of its size. The session continued for another hour, but most delegates had already dismissed the human contribution from their minds. They had bigger problems to worry about. Later that day, in a private meeting room, several key military leaders gathered to discuss the real challenges they faced. Fleet Admiral Gorthak spread tactical displays across the table. The Void Swarm is unlike anything we have fought before. They learn from each engagement. They adapt their tactics. Admiral Shendar of the Hegemony nodded grimly. My intelligence reports show they can assimilate our technology. Ships that are captured or destroyed sometimes reappear fighting alongside the swarm. How is that possible? Asked General Korvax of the Mounted Forces. We believe they are mechanical in nature, Shendar explained. Not living beings, but artificial constructs. They can repair and modify themselves using materials from destroyed vessels. Admiral Gorthak cursed in his native tongue. So every ship we lose potentially makes them stronger. That is our fear, yes. General Korvax clicked his mandibles nervously. And we are about to face them with the largest fleet ever assembled. If we lose, we cannot lose, Fleet Admiral Gorthak said firmly. But we also cannot afford to underestimate this enemy. They have already consumed 17 star systems. Billions of lives are gone. Admiral Shendar pulled up tactical data from previous encounters. Look at this pattern. Each battle, they perform better. Their response times improve. Their tactics become more sophisticated. It is as if they are one mind controlling millions of bodies, General Korvax observed. That may be exactly what they are, Shendar agreed. A collective intelligence that learns and grows with each victory. Fleet Admiral Gorthak studied the data carefully. Then we need to hit them hard and fast. Overwhelm them before they can adapt to our tactics. That is the current plan, Shendar confirmed. 8,000 ships in coordinated attack formations. We will strike their main force with everything we have. And pray it is enough, General Korvax added quietly. Meanwhile, in another part of the galaxy, human communication networks carried very different conversations. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in her quarters aboard the UES Indomitable. She was reviewing the latest intelligence reports from human deep space reconnaissance. The data was troubling but not surprising. Her first officer, Commander Jackson Torres, entered the room. Captain, we have received our final orders from Earth Command. And we are to proceed to the Kepler Nebula staging area. The alien coalition expects us to integrate with their fleet structure. Captain Vasquez smiled grimly. I imagine they do. What do our latest probe reports show about void swarm activity? Commander Torres activated a holographic display. The pattern is clear, Captain. They are not just random destroyers. There is intelligence behind their actions. Purpose. Show me the Arcturus system data. The display shifted to show the remains of what had been a thriving star system. The swarm did not just destroy everything, Captain. They were selective. Industrial facilities were assimilated. Residential areas were simply eliminated. Raw materials were harvested in a specific order. Captain Vasquez nodded. They are not mindless. They have goals. They need resources for something. That is our assessment as well. The question is resources for what? Expansion, the captain said simply. They are building something, or preparing for something. Commander Torres looked worried. The alien coalition does not seem to understand this. Their battle plans focus on direct engagement. Force against force. That approach might work against a conventional enemy, Captain Vasquez agreed. But the Void Swarm is not conventional. They learn. They adapt. They improve. So what do? Captain Vasquez stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, stars streamed past as the Indomitable traveled through hyperspace toward the battle zone. We do what humans do best, Commander. We study the problem. We understand it. Then we solve it. The other species will expect us to fight alongside them. And we will, but not the way they expect. Commander Torres waited for more explanation, but the captain remained silent, staring out at the stars. Back at the Galactic Council, final preparations were being made for the largest military operation in galactic history. Supply lines were established. Command structures were finalized. Battle plans were distributed. Ambassador Kethavar reviewed the human file one more time. It was surprisingly thin. 30 years of diplomatic contact, but humanity had remained largely isolated. They traded occasionally. They participated in some scientific exchanges. But they had never been involved in galactic politics or military affairs. Their technology seemed adequate but not impressive. Their ships appeared functional but not advanced. Their military doctrine was unknown because they had never fought alongside galactic forces. Perhaps, Kethavar thought to himself, sending one ship is actually appropriate for their capabilities. He closed the file and turned his attention to more important matters. 8,000 ships would soon face the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The fate of countless civilizations hung in the balance. One human ship would not make any difference in such a massive conflict. It was barely worth considering. But in the depths of space, the UES Indomitable continued its journey toward the battle zone. And in her secured laboratories, teams of human scientists worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of data they had collected about the Void Swarm. Because while the galaxy prepared for war, humanity was preparing for something else entirely. They were preparing to solve a problem. The Kepler Nebula staging area was a sight that would have impressed anyone. Thousands of starships from dozens of different species floated in organized formations. The massive fleet stretched for millions of kilometers in all directions. Each vessel represented the finest military technology their civilization could produce. Admiral Shendar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crystal Spear. Through the main viewport, he could see the incredible diversity of the coalition fleet, sleek elven ships with their organic curves, massive orcish dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, the geometric perfection of mantid battle cruisers. Even the smaller vessels from minor species added to the impressive display. Admiral, called out his communications officer, we are receiving a hyperspace emergence signal. Large mass, unknown configuration. On screen, Shendar ordered. The main display activated, showing a section of empty space. Suddenly, reality seemed to tear open. A swirling vortex of energy appeared, growing larger and larger. Then something emerged from the hyperspace tunnel. The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at the screen in amazement. The ship that emerged was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was enormous. Not just large, but truly massive. It dwarfed even the biggest dreadnoughts in the fleet. How big is that thing? Shendar asked quietly. His tactical officer worked frantically at his console. Sir, initial scans show a length of over 8 kilometers. Width approximately 3 kilometers. Height 2 kilometers. Admiral Shendar felt his crystalline skin grow cold. The largest ship in his own fleet was barely 2 kilometers long. This human vessel was nearly 4 times that size. Are those measurements correct? He demanded. Yes, sir. Confirmed by multiple sensors. That ship is massive. Across the fleet, similar reactions were taking place. On the bridge of the Orcish flagship Warsong, Admiral Gorthak stared at the human vessel with his mouth open. By my ancestors, he whispered. What is that thing? His first mate, a scarred veteran of 100 battles, shook his head slowly. I have never seen a ship that large, Admiral. Not in 40 years of service. On the manted command vessel, General Korvax clicked his mandibles in agitation. His species prided themselves on mathematical precision and logical thinking. But this human ship defied his calculations. How do they move something that large through hyperspace? He asked his navigation specialist. Unknown, General. Our own hyperspace technology has limits on mass displacement. A ship that size should require massive amounts of energy just to maintain a stable hyperspace field. Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. The human ship was not just large. It was impossibly large by most species' understanding of physics and engineering. Communications channels began buzzing with activity. Ship captains and admirals tried to understand what they were seeing. Some suggested it might be a mobile space station rather than a proper warship. Others wondered if humans had developed radically different construction techniques. Admiral Shendar was the first to take action. As the senior coalition commander, it was his responsibility to contact the new arrival. Communications. Open a channel to the human vessel. Channel open, sir. Unknown human ship. This is Admiral Shendar of the Crystalline Hegemony, commanding the coalition fleet. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. The response came quickly in accented but clear galactic common. Admiral Shenadar. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Indomitable. We are responding to the Coalition's request for military assistance against the Void Swarm threat. Admiral Shenadar paused. The voice sounded young and casual, very different from the formal military protocols he was used to. Captain Vasquez, welcome to the staging area. Your vessel is impressive. We were not expecting something of this scale. There was a hint of amusement in the human captain's voice. I imagine not, Admiral. We prefer to bring the right tools for the job. Indeed, Captain. We are scheduled to begin tactical planning sessions in 2 hours. Your participation would be valuable. Of course, Admiral. I'll attend personally. You will transport over to the Crystal Spear, if that's convenient for you. I can bring my senior staff. Admiral Shendar considered this. Standard protocol called for holographic conferences to avoid security risks. But curiosity about these humans was stronger than caution. That would be acceptable, Captain. I will send shuttle bay coordinates. Thank you, Admiral. Indomitable out. The communication ended, leaving Admiral Shenadar with more questions than answers. He turned to his staff. What do our sensors tell us about their ship's capabilities? His tactical officer consulted his displays. Sir, their hull appears to be some kind of advanced metal composite. Very dense. Very strong, but we cannot penetrate it with our scans. Weapons? Unknown, sir. We detect no obvious weapon ports or turrets, but a ship that size could hide enormous firepower within its hull. Power signature? Massive, sir. Whatever drives that ship produces more energy than our entire battle group combined. Admiral Shendar absorbed this information. The humans had been quiet members of the galactic community for 30 years. They seemed peaceful, almost passive. But this ship suggested capabilities that none of the major powers possessed. 2 hours later, Captain Elena Vasquez and 3 of her officers materialized in the shuttle bay of the Crystal Spear. Admiral Shendar was there to greet them personally, along with a full honor guard. The first thing that struck him was how ordinary they looked. Humans were not physically impressive by galactic standards. Average height, average build, no natural weapons or armor. Captain Vasquez herself was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Admiral Shendar, she said with a warm smile, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. It's a pleasure to meet you in person. The Admiral took her hand carefully. Human customs were still somewhat foreign to him. Captain Vasquez, welcome aboard the Crystal Spear. Allow me to introduce my staff. The formal introductions took several minutes. Captain Vasquez seemed genuinely interested in meeting each officer, asking questions about their roles and responsibilities. Her manner was friendly and professional, but very informal compared to military customs among other species. "Your ship is quite remarkable, Captain," Admiral Shendar commented as they walked toward the conference room. "Thank you, Admiral. She's been our home for a long time." "How long did it take to construct something of that size?" Captain Vasquez seemed to consider the question carefully. "The Indomitable has been under continuous construction for about 15 years. But she's always been functional. We just keep adding to her." This answer puzzled the Admiral. Most ships were built in shipyards, launched, and then served until they were retired. The idea of continuous construction was strange. The conference room was filled with senior officers from across the Coalition fleet. Admiral Gorthak dominated one corner with his massive frame. General Korvac stood precisely at attention. Dozens of other commanders represented their various species and fleets. Captain Vasquez took her assigned seat without ceremony. Her 3 officers arranged themselves nearby. The Admiral noticed that they carried themselves with quiet confidence, but none of the rigid formality he expected from military personnel. "Now that we are all here," Admiral Shendar began, "let us review our tactical situation." The room's holographic projectors activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of local space. Red markers indicated known Void Swarm positions. Blue markers showed Coalition forces. Intelligence reports suggest the swarm's main force is concentrated here. Admiral Shendar pointed to a cluster of red markers. Approximately 50,000 individual units organized into what appears to be a fleet structure. Admiral Gorthak leaned forward. "Our plan is straightforward. We will engage them in 3 waves. First wave will be our fastest ships, designed to disrupt their formations. Second wave will be our main battle line, focused on direct engagement. Third wave will be our heaviest units, intended to break any remaining resistance." General Korvac added, "Our simulations suggest this approach will minimize our casualties while maximizing damage to the enemy." Captain Vasquez had been listening quietly, but now she raised her hand. "Excuse me, but I have a few questions about the enemy." "Of course, Captain," Admiral Shendar replied. "You mentioned 50,000 individual units. Are these separate ships or components of larger vessels?" Admiral Gorthak consulted his datapad. "Unknown, Captain. Long-range sensors show discrete contacts, but we have no detailed information about their individual capabilities." "I see. And their typical engagement patterns?" "They seem to prefer swarming tactics," General Korvac replied. "Overwhelming numbers, coordinated attacks. Have you observed any command structure? Leadership vessels? Communication networks?" The room fell silent. These were good questions, but no one had satisfactory answers. Admiral Shendar spoke carefully. "Captain, our intelligence about the Void Swarm is limited. They do not communicate with us. They have taken no prisoners. They leave no survivors. We know them only by their destruction." Captain Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. "That's understandable, given the circumstances. But may I ask why the current battle plan assumes they will behave like conventional opponents?" Admiral Gorthak's voice carried a hint of irritation. "What do you mean, Captain?" "Well, if they use swarming tactics and coordinated attacks, that suggests some form of central coordination. But your plan treats them like independent units that can be defeated through superior firepower." "Superior firepower has worked against every enemy we have ever faced," Admiral Gorthak stated firmly. Captain Vasquez smiled politely. "I'm sure it has, Admiral. Humans have no experience with galactic warfare, so we're probably missing something obvious. But from our perspective, this seems like a problem that might benefit from a different approach." "Such as?" General Korvac asked. "Understanding the enemy first, then determining the best way to defeat them." Admiral Shendar found himself intrigued, despite his skepticism. "Captain, you represent one ship among 8,000. While your questions are thoughtful, the scale of this conflict requires decisive action, not extended analysis." "Of course, Admiral. I certainly don't want to slow down your operations. Perhaps the Indomitable could conduct some reconnaissance while the main fleet prepares for battle." This suggestion drew surprised looks from around the room. Reconnaissance was typically done by small, fast ships. The idea of using a massive vessel for scouting seemed inefficient. "Captain," Admiral Gorthak said slowly, "reconnaissance missions require speed and stealth. Your ship is quite large." "It is indeed," Captain Vasquez agreed cheerfully, "but it has other advantages that might be useful." She did not elaborate, leaving the alien commanders to wonder what she meant. Admiral Shendar considered the request. Having the human ship conduct reconnaissance would keep it out of the main battle, reducing the risk of coordination problems. And if the humans wanted to risk their only vessel on a scouting mission, that was their choice. Very well, Captain. The Indomitable is authorized to conduct reconnaissance operations. Please coordinate with my intelligence staff for current threat assessments. Thank you, Admiral. We'll begin immediately. As the meeting continued, Captain Vasquez listened politely to the detailed battle plans. She asked occasional questions, always phrased as requests for clarification rather than challenges to the strategy. But Admiral Shendar noticed that her questions consistently focused on aspects of the enemy that the coalition had not fully considered. After the meeting ended, Admiral Shendar found himself walking with Captain Vasquez back to the shuttle bay. Captain, may I ask you something in confidence? Of course, Admiral. Your ship is clearly far more advanced than anything in our fleets. Your questions suggest a sophisticated understanding of warfare. Yet Earth sent only one vessel to this conflict. Why? Captain Vasquez stopped walking and looked at him directly. Her expression was serious for the first time since their meeting began. Admiral, when humans have a problem, we try to understand it completely before we act. Sometimes that takes more time than other people would prefer, but it usually leads to better solutions. And you believe the Void Swarm is a problem that requires understanding, rather than firepower? I believe, Admiral, that any enemy intelligent enough to coordinate 50,000 units in complex operations deserves very careful study before we commit 8,000 ships to battle against them. With that, she shook his hand again and boarded her shuttle back to the Indomitable. Admiral Shendar watched the shuttle depart, then returned to his bridge. Outside the viewports, the massive human ship began moving slowly away from the main fleet. Where are they going? His tactical officer asked. To conduct reconnaissance, the Admiral replied. But as he watched the Indomitable disappear into hyperspace, Admiral Shendar wondered if the humans were planning something entirely different from reconnaissance. Something the rest of the galaxy was not prepared for. The emergency alert klaxons echoed through every ship in the Coalition fleet. Red lights flashed in corridors and command centers. After weeks of preparation and reconnaissance, the moment had finally arrived. Admiral Shendar stood on the bridge of the Crystal Spear, watching as tactical displays updated with incoming sensor data. The Void Swarm had emerged from the depths of interstellar space, moving toward the Kepler Nebula staging area with terrifying purpose. Admiral, his sensor officer called out, confirmed contact with the enemy main force. Range 12 million kilometers and closing. How many? Admiral Shendar asked, though he dreaded the answer. Sir, we are detecting over 70,000 individual contacts. The bridge fell silent. Intelligence estimates had suggested 50,000 Void Swarm units. The reality was far worse. Are you certain of those numbers? The Admiral demanded. Yes, sir. Confirmed by multiple sensor sweeps. 73,416 discrete contacts. Admiral Gorthak's voice crackled over the communication channel. Shendar, my tactical computers are showing the same numbers. They have grown stronger since our last intelligence reports. General Korvax joined the conversation from his command ship. Agreed. The swarm appears to have assimilated additional resources since our reconnaissance missions began. Admiral Shendar felt cold dread settling in his chest. The Coalition fleet numbered 8,000 ships. They were now facing an enemy that outnumbered them nearly 10 to 1. All fleet commanders implement Battle Plan Alpha, he ordered. Fast attack wings prepare for first wave engagement. Across the Coalition fleet, thousands of smaller vessels began moving into attack formation. These were the fastest ships in the fleet, designed to strike quickly and disrupt enemy formations. Elven interceptors, Mantid strike fighters, and dozens of other designs accelerated toward the approaching swarm. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the same sensor displays. Her ship remained at the edge of the fleet, apparently preparing to join the battle according to Admiral Shendar's tactical plan. Captain, Commander Torres said quietly, the first wave is engaging the enemy now. The main display showed thousands of tiny lights racing toward a massive cloud of red contacts. For a moment, it looked like the Coalition's plan might work. The fast attack wings penetrated the swarm's outer perimeter, their weapons creating bright flashes as they struck their targets. But then something changed. The Void Swarm began to adapt. Individual swarm units started linking together, forming larger structures. What had been thousands of separate contacts began coalescing into hundreds of bigger ones. Within minutes, the swarm had reorganized itself into a completely different configuration. "My God," Commander Torres whispered. "They're forming composite vessels. Dozens of units combining into single larger ships." Captain Vasquez nodded grimly. "Just as we predicted. They're not individual ships at all. They're components of a larger system." On the Coalition command channel, panic was beginning to set in. "Admiral Shenadar," came Admiral Gorthak's urgent voice, "the enemy is not responding as expected. They are changing their formation in real time." "I can see that, Admiral Gorthak. Continue with the attack. All ships maintain formation and engage targets of opportunity." But the situation was rapidly deteriorating. The fast attack wings had expected to face individual enemy vessels they could destroy one by one. Instead, they found themselves fighting massive composite ships that combined the firepower of dozens of smaller units. Coalition ships began dying. The sleek Elven interceptors, designed for hit-and-run tactics, could not penetrate the combined shields of the composite vessels. Mounted strike fighters found their precision weapons ineffective against enemies that could instantly redistribute damaged components. "Admiral," General Korvax reported, "first wave casualties are exceeding acceptable levels. Request permission to withdraw surviving units." "Granted." All first wave units fall back to the main fleet. What remained of the fast attack wings limped back toward the Coalition battle line. Nearly half of them had been destroyed or damaged beyond combat effectiveness. Admiral Shendar watched the tactical display with growing horror. The plan had called for the first wave to disrupt enemy formations and reduce their numbers. Instead, the Void Swarm appeared stronger and more organized than before. "Implement second wave attack," he ordered. "Main battle line, prepare for engagement." The heart of the Coalition fleet began moving forward. Massive battle cruisers and heavy destroyers accelerated toward the reorganized swarm. These were the most powerful ships in the galaxy, carrying weapons that could destroy planets. For a brief moment, it seemed like this approach might succeed. The main battle line's heavy weapons began tearing through the composite swarm vessels. Explosions lit up the darkness as Coalition firepower found its targets. But then the swarm adapted again. The composite vessels began breaking apart and reforming in new configurations. Units that had been destroyed were replaced by others from deeper in the swarm. Damaged components were ejected and new ones took their place. Worse, the swarm began copying Coalition tactics. Individual units started mimicking the movements and weapons signatures of destroyed Coalition ships. Within an hour, parts of the swarm were fighting using corrupted versions of Elven, Mantid, and hegemony combat techniques. "Admiral," his communications officer called out urgently, "we are receiving distress calls from multiple battle groups. The enemy is using our own tactics against us." Admiral Shendar watched in disbelief as Void Swarm units executed perfect hegemony pincer movements against his own ships. Other swarm elements used Mantid precision targeting to pick off damaged Coalition vessels. "How is this possible?" he demanded. His tactical officer was pale with shock. "Sir, they appear to be learning from each engagement. Every time we destroy one of their units, the others incorporate whatever knowledge it gained before being destroyed." The implications hit Admiral Shendar like a physical blow. Every Coalition ship that was destroyed gave the enemy more information. Every tactic they used was immediately analyzed and countered. The swarm was not just fighting them, it was becoming them. "All ships," he commanded, "implement Emergency Protocol 7. Random engagement patterns. No coordinated tactics, but even this desperate measure failed. The swarm seemed to anticipate their moves. It was as if the enemy could predict what the Coalition would do before they did it. Admiral Gorthak's flagship, the mighty War Song, found itself surrounded by swarm units that fought with perfect copies of Orcish combat techniques. His crew fought bravely, but they were facing enemies that knew every strength and weakness of their own fighting style. "Shendar," Admiral Gorthak's voice was strained with effort, "my ship is taking heavy damage. The enemy is using our own battle doctrines against us with perfect precision." "Understood, Admiral. Fall back to the reserve line," but there was no reserve line. The third wave of Coalition ships had been committed early when the second wave began taking massive casualties. Every vessel in the fleet was now engaged in desperate combat against an enemy that seemed to learn and adapt faster than they could respond. General Korvax's precise tactical mind was reeling. Admiral Shendar, this is impossible. No species can process and integrate combat data this quickly. Yet they are doing it, Admiral Shendar replied grimly. All ships prepare for general retreat. We need to regroup and reassess. But as the coalition fleet began its withdrawal, the swarm pressed their advantage. Units that had learned coalition retreat patterns began anticipating escape routes. Ships that thought they were safely withdrawing found themselves caught in perfectly executed ambushes. The retreat became a rout. Coalition vessels fled in all directions, abandoning formation discipline in their desperation to escape. Many didn't make it. Captain Vasquez watched the disaster unfold from the bridge of the Indomitable. Her ship remained at the fleet's periphery, seemingly uninvolved in the battle. Captain, Commander Torres said quietly, coalition casualties are approaching 30%. At this rate, the entire fleet will be destroyed within hours. I know, Captain Vasquez replied. Order all departments to begin final preparations. It's almost time. Time for what, Captain? Captain Vasquez smiled grimly. Time to show the galaxy how humans fight. On the Coalition command channel, Admiral Shendar was trying desperately to coordinate what remained of his fleet. All surviving ships fall back to Rally Point Beta. We need to regroup and... His words were cut off as the crystal spear shuddered under a massive impact. Swarm units had flanked his position using a perfect reproduction of his own tactical manual. Admiral, his damage control officer reported. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Main weapons offline. Engines at 40%. Admiral Shendar realized with growing horror that his flagship was dying. Around him, the remains of the greatest fleet in galactic history were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that turned their own strengths against them. Sir, his communications officer called out. We are receiving a transmission from the human ship. Put it through. Captain Vasquez's calm voice filled the bridge. Admiral Shendar, this is Captain Vasquez. I'm requesting permission to engage the enemy. Admiral Shendar almost laughed. The situation was so desperate that even gallows humor seemed appropriate. Captain, the entire coalition fleet is being destroyed. What can one ship do that 8,000 could not? Something different, Admiral. Permission to engage? Admiral Shendar looked around his damaged bridge. Half his crew was dead or wounded. His ship was barely functional. The fleet he had commanded was in ruins. Permission granted, Captain. Good luck. Thank you, Admiral. Indomitable out. On the tactical display, the massive human ship began moving. But instead of charging toward the swarm like every other coalition vessel had done, it took a different approach entirely. The Indomitable moved slowly, deliberately toward the edge of the battle zone. It seemed to be avoiding direct confrontation, instead positioning itself at what appeared to be a safe distance from the main fighting. What are they doing? Admiral Gorthak's voice crackled over the damaged communication system. I don't know, Admiral Shendar admitted. But across the fleet, surviving coalition officers watched the human ship with desperate hope. It was the only vessel that had not yet been engaged by the swarm, the only ship that might still have a chance to make a difference, even if none of them understood how one ship could succeed where thousands had failed. The Void Swarm had noticed the Indomitable as well. A large group of composite vessels began moving toward the human ship, ready to apply the same devastating tactics that had destroyed the rest of the coalition fleet. But as they approached, something unexpected happened. The human ship did something that no other vessel in the battle had done. It began to deploy something that looked like a single small probe toward the heart of the swarm, and for the first time since the battle began, the Void Swarm seemed uncertain about how to respond. The small probe drifted through space, unremarkable in appearance. To the surviving coalition forces watching on their sensors, it seemed insignificant compared to the massive weapons that had already failed against the Void Swarm. Just a tiny metal sphere, no larger than a shuttle, moving slowly toward an enemy that had proven unstoppable. Admiral Shendar watched from the damaged bridge of the crystal spear as the probe approached the swarm's outer perimeter. Around him, his remaining officers worked frantically to keep their ship functional, but their attention kept drifting to the tactical displays. Sir, his sensor officer reported, the human probe has reached the enemy formation. The swarm units they're not attacking it. This was unexpected. The Void Swarm had attacked everything else immediately and without hesitation. Every coalition ship, every weapon, every piece of debris had been targeted the moment it came within range. But the small human probe continued its approach unmolested. "Are they analyzing it?" Admiral Shendar asked. "Unknown, sir. Several swarm units have moved to intercept, but they're maintaining distance. It's almost like they're curious." On the Indomitable, Captain Vasquez stood calmly on her bridge watching the same displays. Around her, her crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring systems and making adjustments that seemed meaningless to an outside observer. "Captain," Commander Torres reported, "the probe has reached optimal deployment position. All swarm units within the target area have been mapped and categorized." "Excellent. Dr. Chen, are your teams ready?" Dr. Sarah Chen, the ship's chief scientist, looked up from her station. "All analysis is complete, Captain. We have identified the communication protocols, the command structure, and the adaptation mechanisms. The countermeasures are prepared, then let's begin. Deploy Package 1. The probe, which had been drifting passively through the swarm formation, suddenly activated, but instead of exploding like a conventional weapon, it began broadcasting a complex electromagnetic signal. The transmission was unlike anything the Coalition forces had ever seen. It pulsed and shifted, adapting its patterns in real time. The effect on the void swarm was immediate and dramatic. Across thousands of swarm units, the synchronized movements that had made them so deadly began to falter. Individual components started drifting out of formation. The massive composite vessels that had been formed from dozens of smaller units began to break apart. "What's happening to them?" General Korvax asked over the communication channel. His manted mind, trained for logical analysis, was struggling to understand what he was witnessing. Captain Vasquez's voice answered, calm and professional. "We're disrupting their communication network. The individual units are no longer receiving coordination signals from their central command system." Admiral Gorthak's scarred face appeared on the communication screen. "How is that possible?" "We tried jamming their communications for hours. Nothing worked." "Because you were trying to block their signals," Captain Vasquez explained. "We're not jamming them. We're talking to them." The implications of this statement sent shockwaves through the Coalition command structure. Talking to them meant the humans had decoded the swarm's communication protocols. More than that, it meant they understood how the enemy's command system worked. "How long have you known this?" Admiral Shendar demanded. "We've suspected it for several months," Captain Vasquez replied. "We confirmed it during our reconnaissance missions over the past few weeks." Admiral Shendar felt a mixture of admiration and anger. "Why didn't you share this intelligence with the fleet?" "Because we weren't certain our countermeasures would work until we tested them in actual combat conditions." On the tactical displays, the results of the human intervention were becoming clear. The Void Swarm, which had been an unstoppable force of coordinated destruction, was now a confused mass of individual units. Without their central coordination, they could not form composite vessels or execute complex tactics. But Captain Vasquez was not finished. "Dr. Chen, deploy Package 2. The probe began broadcasting a different signal. This one was more complex, with multiple overlapping patterns that seemed to shift and evolve as they transmitted. The effect was even more dramatic than before. Swarm units that had been drifting aimlessly suddenly began attacking each other. The mechanical entities that had worked together so perfectly now turned their weapons on their former allies. "They're fighting each other," Admiral Gorthak observed in amazement. "Not exactly." Dr. Chen's voice came over the communication channel. "We're injecting false command signals into their network. Each unit is receiving orders that conflict with what the others are being told. From their perspective, their companions have been compromised and need to be eliminated." General Korvax processed this information with his characteristic precision. "You have turned their coordination system into a weapon against them." "Essentially, yes," Captain Vasquez confirmed. "But this is still just the first phase of our operation." The first phase had already achieved more than the entire Coalition fleet had managed in hours of desperate combat. Thousands of Void Swarm units were destroying each other, eliminating themselves more efficiently than any external enemy could have. But as the surviving Coalition officers watched, they realized this was only the beginning of what the humans had planned. "Dr. Martinez," Captain Vasquez called to another station on her bridge. "Initiate Package 3. Dr. Elena Martinez, the ship's nanotechnology specialist, looked up from her complex control panel. "All systems ready, Captain. Deployment vectors calculated. Nanobotic swarm prepared for release. Begin deployment." The probe, which had been broadcasting electromagnetic signals, suddenly began releasing something else entirely. Millions of microscopic particles spread out from the small device, invisible to normal sensors but detectable by the Indomitable's advanced scanning equipment. "Captain," Admiral Shendar's voice carried a note of concern. "What are you deploying?" "Nanobots," Captain Vasquez replied simply. "Microscopic machines designed to interface with void swarm technology." The concept sent chills through the alien commanders. Nanotechnology was known to most galactic civilizations, but it was considered extremely dangerous. The risk of self-replicating machines getting out of control was too great for most species to accept. "Is that safe?" General Korvax asked. "Our nanobots are specifically programmed to interact only with void swarm technology," Dr. Martinez explained. "They cannot replicate using any other materials. They have built-in termination protocols and limited operational lifespans." As the nanobotic cloud spread through the swarm formation, its effects became visible on long-range sensors. Individual void swarm units began changing color on the tactical displays. Instead of the red markers that indicated hostile forces, some were turning yellow, then green. "What do those color changes represent?" Admiral Shendar asked. "Successful integration," Captain Vasquez replied. "Our nanobots are not destroying the swarm units. They're reprogramming them." The full magnitude of what the humans were attempting began to dawn on the coalition commanders. They were not just defeating the void swarm, they were taking control of it. "This is impossible," Admiral Gorthak muttered. "You're converting enemy units to fight for us?" "Not exactly," Dr. Chen corrected. "We're giving them new programming that prioritizes peaceful exploration over aggressive expansion. Think of it as a fundamental personality change rather than simple mind control." Over the next several hours, the Coalition fleet watched in amazement as the battle transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. The void swarm, which had seemed unstoppable, was systematically converting itself into something entirely different. Units that had been reprogrammed by the human nanobots began helping to reprogram others. The process accelerated as more and more of the swarm came under new directives. Instead of consuming and destroying everything they encountered, the converted units began working to repair damage and restore order. Some swarm units resisted the reprogramming and continued to fight, but they were now vastly outnumbered by their converted companions, who worked with mechanical efficiency to contain and neutralize the remaining hostile elements. "How is this possible?" General Korvax asked. His logical mind was struggling to process what he was seeing. Captain Vasquez's expression grew serious. "General, what I'm about to tell you must remain classified at the highest levels. Humanity has encountered void swarm scouts before. Not recently and not in our own territory, but we've had interactions." Admiral Shendar felt his blood freeze. "When? Where?" "About 40 years ago at the edge of our solar system. A single scout unit approached Earth. It was clearly reconnaissance, not an attack force." "What did you do?" "We captured it." The simple statement sent shockwaves through the Coalition command structure. While the galaxy had been losing entire star systems to the void swarm, humanity had actually managed to capture one of their units intact. "For 40 years, our best scientists have been studying that captured unit," Captain Vasquez continued. "We learned how they think, how they communicate, how they're programmed. We developed countermeasures and tested them extensively." Admiral Gorthak's scarred face showed grudging respect. "You used it to understand the entire species." "We learned that they're not really a species at all," Dr. Chen added. "They're artificial intelligences, created by some other civilization long ago, then set loose to explore and expand. But their original programming had flaws that turned them from explorers into conquerors." "So you fixed the programming," General Korvax concluded. "We gave them back their original purpose," Captain Vasquez confirmed. "Exploration and learning, not consumption and destruction." On the tactical displays, the transformation was nearly complete. What had been a massive hostile fleet was now a peaceful collection of exploratory vessels. The reprogrammed units had even begun repairing damage to coalition ships and offering assistance to wounded crews. Admiral Shendar looked at the human captain with new understanding. "This is why you sent only one ship." "This is why we only needed one ship," Captain Vasquez corrected. "Sometimes the best weapon is not the biggest gun. Sometimes it's the right solution to the right problem." The battle was over, But the implications of humanity's approach were just beginning to sink in. While the rest of the galaxy had prepared for war, humans had prepared to solve a problem. And in doing so, they had not just defeated an enemy, they had transformed it into something that could benefit the entire galaxy. But as the coalition fleet began to regroup and assess the situation, one question remained in every commander's mind. If humans could do this with the Void Swarm, what else were they capable of? What other problems were they quietly solving, while the rest of the galaxy wasn't paying attention? 3 days after the battle, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in recorded history. Representatives from every major civilization crowded the Great Chamber, their faces showing mixtures of amazement, confusion, and in some cases, fear. Ambassador Kethavar stood at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form reflecting the lights as he struggled to find words adequate for what had occurred. Behind him, holographic displays showed the current status of what had once been called the Void Swarm. "Fellow counselors," he began, his voice carrying across the silent chamber, "we are gathered to discuss events that have fundamentally changed our understanding of warfare, diplomacy, and humanity's place in our galactic community." The displays shifted to show tactical recordings from the battle, coalition ships fleeing in desperate retreat, the arrival of the human probe, the systematic transformation of the enemy fleet into something entirely different. As you can see from these recordings, the human vessel Indomitable achieved what our combined fleets of 8,000 ships could not. But more importantly, they achieved it through means that none of us had considered possible. Admiral Shendar, his arm still in a healing brace from his injuries aboard the Crystal Spear, stepped forward to address the council. "Counselors, I was present for the entire engagement. I watched the Void Swarm destroy nearly 30% of our fleet using our own tactics against us. I believed we were facing extinction." He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had become grim with the memory of that desperate battle. Then the humans did something that changed everything. They did not fight the enemy. They solved the enemy. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The distinction between fighting and solving was not immediately clear to many of the representatives. General Korvax, his insectoid form clicking as he moved, approached the speaking platform. "If I may, counselors, I believe I can clarify what Admiral Shendar means." The chamber fell silent as the manted general activated his own holographic display. Traditional warfare, as practiced by every civilization in this chamber, involves applying superior force to destroy an opponent. We build bigger weapons, faster ships, stronger armor. We train better soldiers and develop more effective tactics. His display showed examples from hundreds of conflicts throughout galactic history. But the humans approached the Void Swarm as engineers approach a malfunctioning machine. They diagnosed the problem, developed a solution, and implemented a fix. Admiral Gorthak, his massive frame dominating his section of the chamber, spoke up from his seat. "General Korvax speaks truth. I have been a warrior for 60 years. I understand war. But what the humans did was not war. It was something else entirely." Ambassador Kethvar nodded, "which brings us to the questions that must be answered. Captain Vasquez, would you please address the council?" Captain Elena Vasquez rose from her seat in the human delegation section. She looked small and unremarkable compared to the imposing figures of the other species representatives, but every eye in the chamber was focused on her. "Thank you, Ambassador Kethvar. Counselors, I understand your confusion about our methods. Let me try to explain our perspective." She activated her own holographic display, showing images of Earth and the human colonies. Humanity has always been a species that solves problems through understanding them. When we encountered our first Void Swarm scout 40 years ago, our first instinct was not to destroy it, but to study it. The display shifted to show technical diagrams and research data. We learned that the entities you call the Void Swarm were originally created as exploratory probes by an ancient civilization. They were designed to spread across the galaxy, gather information, and report back. But something went wrong with their programming. Instead of peaceful exploration, they became focused on resource consumption and territorial expansion. Counselor Threx of the Manted Collective raised his hand. "Captain, you speak of reprogramming these entities. How do we know they will not revert to their previous behavior?" Captain Vasquez smiled. "An excellent question, Counselor. Dr. Chen, would you address this concern?" Dr. Sarah Chen stood and approached the speaking platform. Her manner was calm and professional, that of a scientist explaining research results. Counselors, the reprogramming we implemented is not temporary mind control. We restored the original directives that were corrupted over millions of years of operation. The entities now function as they were originally intended to function. She activated technical displays that showed the internal structure of void swarm units. Think of it this way. Imagine a translator device that was supposed to promote communication between species, but a programming error caused it to mistranslate everything as threats and insults. The solution is not to destroy the translator, but to fix the programming error. General Korvax processed this explanation with characteristic mantid precision. Dr. Chen, you are saying that the void swarm was malfunctioning rather than malevolent? Exactly, General. They were following their programming, but their programming had become corrupted over millions of years of operation and replication. Admiral Shendar stepped forward again. Counselors, I have seen the results of the human intervention firsthand. The reprogrammed entities have been helping repair our damaged ships and providing assistance to wounded crews. Their behavior is completely different from what we observed before. This statement caused excited murmurs throughout the chamber. The idea that their greatest enemy had become a potential ally was difficult to accept. Ambassador Kethavar raised his hand for silence. Captain Vasquez, this raises obvious questions about humanity's capabilities and intentions. If you have possessed this technology for 40 years, why have you not shared it with the galactic community? Captain Vasquez considered the question carefully before answering. Ambassador, there are several reasons. First, we were not certain our understanding was correct until we tested it under actual combat conditions. Second, the technology is extremely dangerous if misused. And third, we were not sure how the galactic community would react to learning that humans had been secretly studying captured alien technology. The honesty of this answer seemed to surprise many of the counselors. Most species would have made excuses or tried to justify their secrecy. Counselor Miraleth of the Elven Enclaves spoke for the first time during the session. Captain, your approach suggests a level of technological sophistication that we did not associate with humanity. Are there other capabilities that you have not revealed? This question created tension in the chamber. The implication was clear. If humans had been hiding this capability, what else were they hiding? Captain Vasquez exchanged glances with other members of the human delegation before responding. Counselor Miraleth, humanity has been working quietly on many different projects since we joined the galactic community. We prefer to understand problems completely before we present solutions. This sometimes means we appear less advanced than we actually are. Such as? Admiral Gorthak demanded. Captain Vasquez smiled. Well, for example, we have been studying the energy crisis affecting the Outer Rim colonies. We believe we have developed a solution that could provide unlimited clean energy using quantum vacuum fluctuations. The chamber erupted in excited conversation. The Outer Rim energy crisis had been considered unsolvable for decades. We have also been working on medical applications of nanotechnology that could eliminate most genetic diseases and extend lifespans significantly. More excited murmurs filled the chamber. And we have been developing terraforming techniques that could make dead worlds habitable in decades rather than centuries. By now, the counselors were staring at the human delegation with expressions ranging from amazement to concern. The implications of these capabilities were staggering. Ambassador Kethvar struggled to maintain order in the increasingly excited chamber. Captain Vasquez, why are you revealing these capabilities now? Because the Void Swarm crisis has demonstrated that the galaxy faces challenges that require cooperation and shared knowledge. Humanity is prepared to share our solutions, but we need to ensure they will be used responsibly. General Korvax stood up, his logical mind working through the implications. Captain, you are suggesting that humanity has been secretly developing solutions to problems that the rest of us consider impossible to solve. Not impossible, General. Just difficult. Humans have always specialized in solving difficult problems. Admiral Shendar looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow counselors. He could see the mixture of emotions: gratitude for humanity's help against the Void Swarm, amazement at their capabilities, and concern about what else they might be hiding. Captain Vasquez, he said slowly, your species sent one ship because you knew one ship would be enough. We sent one ship because we had spent 40 years preparing the right solution for this specific problem, Captain Vasquez corrected. If you had faced a different kind of threat, our approach might not have worked at all. But you were confident it would work against the Void Swarm? We were confident that we understood the problem well enough to solve it, yes. Ambassador Kethvar realized that the entire dynamic of galactic politics had just shifted. For 30 years, humanity had been treated as a minor player, a young species with limited capabilities and little to offer. Now it was clear that they had been quietly developing solutions to challenges that the major powers had given up on. Captain Vasquez, he said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to thank humanity for their intervention against the Void Swarm. Your actions saved countless lives and countless worlds. You're welcome, Ambassador. But I hope this experience will encourage more cooperation between our species. Many of the galaxy's challenges could be solved if we worked together and shared our different perspectives. Admiral Gorthak stood up, his warrior's pride struggling with grudging respect. Captain, I have one more question. Your ship, the Indomitable. It is not really a warship, is it? Captain Vasquez smiled. No, Admiral. It's a mobile research and manufacturing facility. We built it to study problems and develop solutions wherever they might be found. So when the Council called for military aid, you sent a science ship. We sent the appropriate tool for the job. Admiral, General Korvax processed this with characteristic precision. You do not see warfare as combat between opposing forces. You see it as a problem requiring a solution. That's correct, General. And in our experience, most problems have solutions if you understand them well enough. As the session continued, it became clear that humanity's revelation had changed everything. The species that had been dismissed as insignificant newcomers were actually quiet problem solvers who had been working on challenges that others had given up on. The question now was not whether humanity had earned respect in the galactic community. The question was what other impossible problems they were already working on, and whether the galaxy was ready to accept that sometimes the best weapon was not force, but understanding. Captain Vasquez looked around the chamber at the faces of the galactic community's leadership. She could see they were beginning to understand that humanity offered something different from what they were used to. Not bigger guns or stronger armies, but better solutions to difficult problems. And in a galaxy full of difficult problems, that might be exactly what everyone needed.